you go to your parents and be like a new book called Battle Pope. They're going to be like, oh, cool. What has to happen for me to actually be the fifth partner? Like, is that a thing that can actually happen? Like, there's all these little
Yeah.
moments where I go, fuck, if that didn't happen, I'd be nothing.
Well, following up on that, and I want to get into a little bit more of what you did at Image and stuff, but you
Sure.
mentioned how you accumulated a huge amount of debt during that time, which is, like kind of putting a lot of faith in yourself too, though. It is.
Sure.
But how long was it until you sort of told your parents, like, I am doing comics full time? Did they always know?
No, they did not. My father was a small business owner, and so I did not feel comfortable going to him and being like, "So I've thrown caution to the wind. I've quit my day job, and I'm making these dumb comic books.
They're not dumb.
And I hope that it will at some point." Battle Pope was a stupid comic book, and I'm very proud of how stupid it was. So don't argue with me there. But you go to your parents and be like a new book called Battle Pope. They're going to be like, "Oh, cool." No, that's going to go over poorly. But yeah, I didn't tell them because I didn't want them to worry. I
Of
didn't want them
course.
to, be freaking out over my, lack of a future. So it was probably, I don't know if it was when I started at Marvel or if it was when I was doing regular work at Image, and I don't know. Like, it
Maybe
wasn't
somewhere
until I
around
started getting
2004,
paid by
though.
Marvel that I was actually gainfully employed. Like, I was struggling up until
Yeah.
that point. I mean, I did He-Man comics with Val Staples, and
I remember
that kept me afloat for a while.
stuff
And
like
then
that.
Rob Liefeld actually hired me to do a number of comics. Some of them weren't actually published, and that kept me afloat for a while. Him paying me that money, so
That's
that kind
amazing.
of bridged me to the point where I was doing work at Marvel. But it was probably like 2 or 3 years of completely being in debt, not knowing if I was ever going to come out of it, and like reading credit card like statements and being like, I'm never going to be able to pay this money back. I think I looked into if debtor's prison was still a thing at a certain point.
Oh my God.
But at some point by the time I told my parents what I was doing, I had amassed a long box of comic books that I had written, and I loaded a long box into the back of my car, and I drove down to Florida. I was living in Kentucky. They were living in Florida at the time. And I drove down to Florida and was like, I didn't tell you about this. Here's all these books I've been doing. So, and I presented them with a long box of comics.
That's amazing. That really is, to like sort of keep something like that and then just be like, but now I'm successful.
Yeah.
um, this next section is all about math. So it's all algebra.
Is this interview going to be about how crazy I am and how many stupid things I did?
No, that I just needed, like, when we talk about different ways that people break into the industry, I do think it's important to sort of explain that, like, it's doable the way you did it with self-publishing, but there's tremendous risk involved. And, you have to like have confidence to keep going forward if you're going to go that route.
I mean, I like to say it's like a perfect mixture of like confidence and stupidity and stubbornness,
yeah.
There were a lot of things that I was unaware of at the time that, like, thinking back, I'd be like, fuck,
But I think
like,
that
if I
that's
had
what like
known that
helps
that's
young
how
people
things were.
sometimes succeed, is not knowing
Yeah.
what they don't
Yeah.
know.
But like breaking into any entertainment business, I think is going to involve a tremendous amount of risk and a tremendous amount of like pain and hardship, like becoming
Sure.
an actor, becoming a director, like anything. Like, you have to take a lot of crazy risks and do a lot of crazy stuff. And, you have to understand that 9 times out of 10, it's not going to be worth it,
It,
which is terrifying.
absolutely. Well, it's amazing how many of the Image creators really help give you breaks. I mean, obviously Valentino was the
Yeah.
publisher when you were like putting out some of your first comics. You just
I think
told us
Mark
about how
Silvestri is the only
Liefeld.
one that's never done a goddamn thing for me.
Who?
I
Who?
said Mark Silvestri. I'm kidding.
You worked with him though.
I did work with him, yes.
Yeah. You said Liefeld gave you some opportunities,
Yeah.
but like Eric Larson was like a huge factor early on. I mean, he gave you like the Super
was great.
Patriot series and a lot of guidance and stuff. How did you ever hook up with him and like meet him and stuff, befriend him?
There was a guy named Terry Stevens, who you'll remember, who created the website
Definitely.
penciljack.com and also drew the St. Michael Battle Pope spinoff miniseries. And
That I was in. You put in a character named Pierce.
yeah, I probably did something horrible to that character too, but whatever. But
But yeah, Terry's great. Oh, Terry knew Eric?
Well, Terry, when when Pencil Jack was first conceived, it was going to be an all-encompassing comic book website,
Right.
and it ended up mostly staying a message board for the duration of its existence. But there was a time where he was going to do creator interviews and tutorials and all kinds of like different things, and so he had scheduled an interview with Eric Larson and was like, "Oh yeah, I guess I'm going to be interviewing Eric Larson like in a couple of weeks," and I was like, "Would you like me to interview Eric Larson for you instead?" And he was like, yeah, you wanna do that? And I was like, I very much want to do that. And so
Yeah.
I went
Oh,
out and
okay.
I bought a little micro cassette recorder, and I think I recorded him on speakerphone or something.
Huh.
And it's really frustrating because I interviewed him for, I want to say, at least 3 hours. And I talked to
Wow.
him about, I don't even remember, but I was the biggest Savage Dragon fan, still am.
Me
Uh,
too.
and uh, uh, and it was just, it was great. Like he would talk on the phone with a headset while he was drawing, so he's at a table drawing for 8-9 hours a day, and so he would talk on the phone like whatever. So full
Wow.
3 hour conversation. And then I turned the cassette into Terry so that he could get it transcribed for the website, and then he lost it. So it was very upsetting to me that like my very first
Oh
conversation
my
with Eric
God.
Larson was this 3 hour long conversation that I actually had on tape. I'm sure it would be super embarrassing if I had it, if I could find it. I would love to listen to it just to hear like
Well, that means
just
it's
how
probably still
ridiculous I
out
was.
there. Terry
It's
could
probably
still
still out there
find it.
somewhere. Yeah, who knows? But I should probably contact Terry about that someday. But
Yeah.
in the interview, there had been some kind of conversation about I feel am I looking bored now? Sorry. There was some kind of conversation about Savage Dragon guest starring in an issue of Battle Chasers, and I asked him in the interview like, well, how does that work? Battle Chasers takes place in this like weird fantasy realm, and Savage Dragon is like a real world thing, and like what's he going to go into another dimension, or like what are you guys planning on doing for that? And he was like, yeah, I told Joe, like, just make him a fucking barbarian. I just think that'd be cool if Dragon showed up in Battle Chasers and there was no explanation for how he was there whatsoever. And,
Why
like
not?
he's just a guy running around with a battle axe. I think that'd be cool. And then he kind of was just like, I don't think these crossovers or guest appearances have to be beholden to anything. He's like, I would love it if Dragon just showed up in a comic book as a hot dog vendor. Like, I think that would be funny. And I was like, well, Eric, I don't mean
Yeah.
to put you on the spot or anything, but I do a comic book called Battle Pope, and I would love to have Savage Dragon show up as a hot dog vendor in that comic book if you'd be okay with that. And he was like, yeah, sure, whatever. That's cool. And I don't think he thought I was actually going to take him up on that. But if you read Battle Pope Shorts #1, I think it is,
I
which I
remember.
think was collected at Image as Battle Pope 5 when it was in color, Savage Dragon is there as a hot dog vendor. And from that relationship, I just started talking to him regularly. And
Okay.
because, once the guy's in your book, like you have to show him pages, you have to get his opinion on things, you have to send him comps, like there was a lot of interaction with him at that point. And and I always loved Image Comics, wanted to be a part of Image Comics. And I only ever was a publisher because no one else would publish me. I did not endeavor to be a self-publisher. And so I just started trying to I love the guy, I loved his work. I was like, I
Yeah.
would talk to Eric Larson for days, but I had to set a schedule. Like I would be like, okay, I feel like I haven't talked to him for 8 days. It's totally normal for me to call now. If I call him every day or every other day, it's gonna get weird. So I would like restrict myself on how often I could call him. And we would talk about Dragon and different things. And
Wow.
I ended up lettering like backup stories for him. And every now and then he'd have me
Yeah.
letter a cover, and I would like put a typo on the cover of Savage Dragon, which was a real honor. Um,
That happened?
I did, huh?
That
Yeah,
actually
no, that
happened?
totally happened. I think it's the cover of Savage Dragon 109. It's like a
Okay.
big purple guy that's like tackling a guy, and I totally left or maybe there's a few word balloons that I made, and one of them has a huge typo where I just left a word out. Now, in my defense, I had to do it very quickly. It was a rush job, and there
Yeah.
were multiple people that looked at that cover other than me, so somebody could have caught it. But I think Larson blames me, and that's fine. That's fine. I don't hold a grudge. I don't hold a grudge. But it's either 109 or there's a later issue where he is fighting the character Prism that first appeared in Graphic Fantasy, if you want to get a little inside baseball. And it might be that word balloon that I did that has a typo in it. But
Okay.
yeah, I would
You
do
did
that kind of
lettering
stuff
for
from
quite
time
a
to time.
while. You did lettering on
I
all your
mean,
early comics. Like when did you sort of hand that off to guys like Russ Wooten and stuff? Like, do you remember?
Walking Dead 19 was the first issue that Russ Wooten lettered, and Invincible, I want to say, I think it was a little earlier, 14. I think Invincible 14 was the
You
first
did a
book that
little
I
over
didn't
a
letter.
year once you were established at Image doing
Yeah,
your own series.
but I was very meticulous about the lettering. One, if you're out there and you're struggling to break into comics and you're trying to make your own comics, uh, lettering is far more important than most creators realize. It is literally the difference between having a professional looking pitch and having an unprofessional looking pitch. You can
Yeah,
have the best art and put the shittiest lettering on it, and it is
ruins it.
very difficult for anyone to look past that,
It can be
and
an
it makes you
invisible
look
art.
like an amateur.
Yeah,
Very much,
I
very much so.
remember. In fact, like going back maybe 2003 or four, we were at like a Wizard World convention together, and
Uh,
because you had a booth, people would like sometimes give you their self-published comics and stuff. You weren't necessarily the Robert Kirkman of today, but you had a booth, so people give
Far from
comics.
it.
You breathe rarefied air now, sir. With um, and I remember though, that was just a fart. just a,
But it was a good one.
you should still write comedy, in my opinion. But no, I remember it was like there was a decent issue we were looking at in the hotel room that night, and but all you were talking about to all of us were like, I cannot read this comic because he did that thing where the lettering you could see through the word balloon, you could see the art
Oh,
faintly and stuff, and
uh,
it totally like just deep six the comic. And I remember how seriously you always have taken that. You have a lot of faith in like guys like Russ who like
well, I'm a
he's
huge fan
amazing.
of lettering. I've actually bought original art just for Chris Eliopoulos, like word balloons and stuff
He's
that are
great.
done on the pages. But the thing that makes me frustrated about it, which is the magic of lettering, is that you have no excuse as an up and coming creator for not having like professional level lettering on your book,
Just take your
because
time.
lettering is the only art form in comics that you can literally trace everything and no one will notice and no
Right.
one cares. Like all of my lettering was literally traced and based on John Workman and Chris Eliopoulos' work. One of the reasons why I, shouldn't have
Yeah.
kept lettering, because I was basically just cribbing whatever they would do. I would get scans of Savage Dragon pages when John Workman was lettering Savage Dragon, and I would take the scan of the page into I would letter in a program called CorelDRAW,
I remember.
uh, and instead of Adobe Illustrator, because I think that was more expensive or something. I don't understand. And I would just trace them, and I would make an EPS file of the lettering that was on the board. And then you find a professional. I mean, Blambot and Comicraft fonts are not that expensive. You just
No.
find a good lettering font, trace all your word balloons, and you're good to go. Like, it's not that hard to
Have
figure out the
uniform
spacing and
tails,
everything.
understand placement, things like that. Yeah.
But that said, I was so meticulous about it. Like, it would take me at least an hour to letter a page.
Really.
And so, yeah, lettering took me at least 2 or 3 straight days. So if I was doing 2 or 3 books a month, like that was like a week of my month was lettering comics. And
Did
so,
you ever find yourself like writing pages that had less text, thinking of your own work that would be involved?
no,
Okay.
no, 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 I wouldn't do that. But the benefit of doing that is that I would be in the page, lettering the page, and I would go, this would look better if this balloon was over here. I can change this dialogue and cut this word and move it, and like I can make this work this way. Like I could actually like change the dialogue like as I was lettering it,
And,
which
and
was
I was
which
just
is
realizing a letterer is basically one of the last people to touch that page before it gets sent off to press. So that was sort of like your last chance to see to see your own work, because you didn't really have like a professional editor or anything at that time. You could like
no,
make
definitely
sure that
not.
your work was looking good for press.
Yeah, and a lot of times, I would be
Yeah.
in there lettering a page, and I'd be like, "Oh, okay, let me clean out this like little bit of pencil that's showing up in the scan, or let me
Wow.
move this thing there." Or I did coloring corrections, a lot back then, where I'd go, oh, this eyeball's wrong. Let me change this color. Let me change that color. I was very much in those pages while I was lettering them, fucking them up in all kinds of different ways I probably shouldn't have been. But yeah, because I'm sure I messed up the trapping and all these other technical color things when I was doing coloring corrections that I probably shouldn't have done. But it was nice at that time to have the time and to be able to, make
Get
sure everything was
hands-on.
exactly the way I wanted. Yeah.
One thing I'm curious about is like around, I think it was 2008 when you became a partner at Image. Do I have the timeline right there? Was it somewhere around there?
Yeah. Before we do that, there is a specific example. If you go back and you look at Invincible issue 3, and Corey, I don't think was happy about this, but the Flaxens pull Omni-Man into a portal
Right.
later in that issue. And I was doing the lettering and I was like, the Flaxens are not strong enough to grab Omni-Man and pull him into this portal. And it was like a logic mistake that it was kind of bugging me. I was like, he's like a Superman type character. He's super powered.
Right.
These guys are not super powered. How in the hell did they pull him in that portal? And one of them had their hand like up on Omni-Man's head like this. And I took a piece of Robot's flying bike from issue 2, and I cut it off in Photoshop, and I put it in the Flaxen's hand like he was putting some kind of control device on Omni-Man. Like, I don't know, they're from another dimension. They fucking put like some kind of thing on his head to like neutralize him and pull him into the portal. And so that's an example of, when I was lettering, I was able to actually go in and do that. But if you look at that page, you can go back into issue 2 and find a picture of Robot's flying bike, and it's like a little like grill on the side of the motorcycle that I just photoshopped and moved over. So
yeah, that's interesting.
So yeah. Anyway, 2008. What were you saying?
Well, no. I mean, that was super interesting, actually. But I was curious. Like, you become a partner at Image. You're the only guy that wasn't there at the founding. They I guess invite you to be a partner. How were you approached about that? Like, how was that? Was that something that like slowly happened, or did you get a call one day? Like, how did that actually take place?
Yeah, I mean, it happened very slowly, because I had made that connection with Larson through Battle Pope, and I had, kept in touch and had done all kinds of stuff with him. Super Patriot happened because Corey Walker drew a Super Patriot drawing for fun.
It was awesome.
And I was like, this is great. Like, I should show this to these guys. And I showed it to Larson, and Larson was like, I'll totally print that. So it printed in the back of Dragon as a backup. And when it printed in the back of Dragon as a backup, Eric Stevenson and Jim Valentino, who were running Image at the time, Eric was a marketing guy, Jim Valentino was a publisher. They saw that pinup and they contacted Larson and they said, this guy's amazing.
He is.
You should get this guy to do a Super Patriot miniseries. And he's okay. He's okay. Corey's fine. But
I've never thought Corey had such a big ego that you needed to tamp that down right now. That was Corey's.
You
very
haven't talked to him in a number of years. He's he's off the charts egomaniac at this point. You would be
okay.
I'm totally kidding. I'm totally kidding. But no, the joke here is that Corey is an extremely humble guy. But you could trace my career back to Corey deciding to draw Super Patriot pinup. Like, there's all these little moments where I go, fuck, if that didn't happen, I'd be nothing. But I went to Corey and was like, oh my God, these guys, want you to do a Super Patriot miniseries. And I don't know if I shoehorned myself in there or if he didn't want to write it. We were working on Science Dog at the time.
Right.
And so Larson called me and was like, hey, they want these, they're saying that they want this guy to do a Super Patriot miniseries. Is that something you'd be interested in? And I was like, well, we're doing Science Dog at the time. And it's kind of funny. I feel like that was when Corey was living with me. I think it was.
Probably.
I should have a better recollection of this. But I just went into the other room and was like, Corey, they want us to do a Super Patriot miniseries. I think I had actually pitched Science Dog to them. I'm getting this all wrong. I think I had pitched Science Dog to them, and what they said was, no one wants a comic book with a talking dog. Have these guys do a Super Patriot miniseries instead. I think that's what happened because they had seen that pinup. And so I went to Corey and was like, they're kind of iffy on Science Dog. They're not saying they're definitely not going to publish it, but they're a little worried that it's a talking dog comic and people don't like talking dogs. They want us to do a Super Patriot book. And Corey was very invested in Science Dog and was like, if you can promise me we'll do Science Dog as soon as we finish Super Patriot, I'll do the Super Patriot miniseries. And I was like, promise, definitely, totally going to happen. Then we ended up doing Invincible instead. But yeah, that's so then I started doing Invincible, met Jim Valentino, Eric Stevenson, started pitching more and more books to them. Before Super Patriot was actually out, I was pitching Tech Jacket to them. Before Tech Jacket was out, I was pitching Invincible and Walking Dead to them, Brit, Cloudfall, Capes, all these books that people don't remember
Reaper.
and possibly have never heard of. But I did all these books at Image. And because I was doing so many books at Image, I was on the phone with the Image office like daily almost. And so I knew the receptionist. I would talk to Brent Braun. I would talk to, all these different people that, Brett Evans, all these different designers that were working there. I was on the phone with Jim Valentino, Eric Stevenson constantly. Eric Stevenson and I got very close, got to a point where I talked to Eric Stevenson pretty much multiple times a day. And every time I would call, the receptionist would kind of make this joke like, hey, it's the fifth partner, because there were 4 partners at the company at the time. And everyone in the office would be like, I hear from Robert Kirkman more than we hear from Todd McFarlane. Like, well, what the hell? Like, this guy's crazy. He's doing all this stuff. It's nuts. And so I had heard of the joke that I was the 5th partner. And at a certain point, I was talking to Stevenson like many years into this, and I was like, what? Like, what has to happen for me to actually be the 5th partner? Like, is that a thing that can actually happen? And Stevenson was like, no. Like I'm not going to name names, but many creators in the past have said, I will come to Image or I will not leave Image if you make me a partner. And the answer is always no, because the partners have a very firm rule that if you're holding their feet to the fire, the answer is always going to be no. Mm-hmm. So you can't ask to be made an Image partner, which is important.
They formed it.
But I knew Valentino, I knew Larson. I started talking to Mark Silvestri about these pilot season books. And then the real key was when I started doing Haunt with Todd McFarlane. And while I was doing Haunt with Todd McFarlane, I was very upset with Marvel Comics. Did not like them. I won't get into too much details.